I'm not a futurist, but I see a potential future state where you're in an evolve or get left behind situation, not a this is going to replace.
Yeah.
This is going to replace you. Most likely not, but you need to learn how to coexist with the technology to speed up your turnaround times, increase the quality of your output, things of that nature. Not be afraid that it's going to do what you were capable of doing in less time.
Welcome to Get Discovered, a podcast about AI, SEO, and online discoverability. In the first season of the podcast, we're focused on simplifying AI. We're taking a step back and trying to understand how people are using it, what it actually is, and hopefully help make it easier to understand for you and your business. Today with us, we have Jonathan Bentz. Jonathan is a growth strategist at Direct Online Marketing, or DOM for short. That's a renowned digital marketing agency based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Whoop, whoop. Dom has helped hundreds of brands scale their online presence, some even with Prerender.io along the way. Welcome to the show, Jonathan, aka Bentz.
Hey.
How's it going today?
Joe, thank you so much for having me on the show. I feel like all of us are talking about artificial intelligence to some degree, whether it's around our kitchen tables or into our Zoom feeds. So I'm looking forward to getting into this with you today.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, well, kind of building off of that. So we have a little project. We're trying to crowdsource definitions of AI. We've had a lot of people submit some responses to the forum. And just to kick things off, I want to read a few of them. So let's start here. So one definition from someone who's a senior SEO specialist, quote unquote, to me, AI is like having a close friend I can always text, and that would provide me with her perspective. But more than that, I can turn AI also into my personal assistant, which I wouldn't do with my friend, obviously. really interesting kind of take there. I think, so apropos of this, I've actually been reading a little bit more about the privacy concerns kind of coming up with all of these chatbots and assistants, all of that kind of stuff. Some people who use ChatGPT, for example, don't realize that the prompts you put in and all the information that you put in those prompts then become training data for that large language model itself. So when you, for instance, ask something about the rash on your leg or how to deal with a conflict with your wife or something like that, that's no longer private.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting kind of paradigm there. And also, I guess Meta's implementation of Llama, the UI is such that it's not obvious when you type a prompt in there, it'll actually be linked to your Facebook profile in a public way. So some people have been yeah, exactly.
I was today years old when I learned that. Okay.
Yeah. So word to the wise, just keep track of what you share and what context and all of that kind of stuff. But it's interesting. I think, I'll read another one here that I think is pretty similar to this. So we actually had a guest on a previous episode that talked about artificial intelligence being a remix engine. So it's a way to remix the knowledge and thoughts we fed our machines in different ways. And artificial intelligence tomorrow will be a reimagining of that knowledge in ways that we can't yet comprehend. So it's really, I think something is interesting to me right now, because what we're trying to do, at least with this little segment, is establish the fact that nobody really has a stable definition of what artificial intelligence is.
Right.
And I think if you go on the street and you ask 5 people what their definition for it is, you'll get 10 different responses. And especially if you ask someone outside of the tech industry, it's even more kind of amorphous and difficult for them to describe. But a lot of it, from what I've seen, is people that use the ChatGPTs or the Claudes or the Geminis as this canonical example of artificial intelligence, when in reality, the definition of it or the kind of applications of it really extend beyond that large language model in ways that I think have already arrived, but people aren't necessarily conscious of. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So similar to a lot of us, I think, a lot of those conversations over the last year, 2.5 years have really been self-contained to those concerns about the evolution of LLMs. But for me, as I think about it, a lot of us have already, to that point about artificial intelligence being greater than just the LLMs, a lot of us have already started incorporating that into our daily lives. And it's not something that you even think about. So is Siri artificially intelligent? Is Alexa artificially intelligent? Probably, if you're thinking through this, right, you're starting to nod your head. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And we've become ubiquitous with those as an assistant to come along with us. Is the computer in your car, right? You may not have a Tesla. You may not have access to Waymo, but is there a computer in your car making decisions for you, whether you have it turned on or not? Yes. Is there, if you work in a plant, is there a robot next to you that maybe 20 years ago it was another human? Yes. And so all of these things are, whether we call it automation, whether we call it computerization, whether we call it artificial intelligence, there's a non-human brain programming and making decisions alongside a human. And that ultimately, for me at least, is how those things have their own intelligence that is not human instinctual intelligence. So it's artificial. So we've all been using artificial intelligence. We just haven't had something that we've had to adopt at this stage with this potential.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree mostly, except for the fact that I wouldn't call Siri intelligent, but that's sorry to the Apple fans, but that's a topic for a different thing.
And I've noticed that as well. So, just like you're one of those first anecdotes that you shared, what you put in is what you get out. So around my house, there's a lot of Alexa devices. And I've noticed that as well, where when we're talking to the Alexa devices, you get frustrated with it. Oh, it's not understanding how I talk, or maybe it understands how an adult talks, but an 11-year-old may fumble over their words or not fully think their thought process out. And then it has a hard time with that. And you're like, this thing's dumb. But it's still smarter than than a computer that you didn't have, that you weren't able to talk to 10 years ago.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, so narrowing in on this, if I asked you to give me a 1 or 2 sentence definition of artificial intelligence, what would you say?
It's a non-human being system capable of making decisions.
So it's a disembodied decision engine.
Wow. Yeah. If I had to take what I just said and put it into GPT and have it say it back to me, yeah, that's probably what it would say.
All right. Thank you. I'll be here all day. Yeah, okay.
100%.
Yeah. That's interesting. So for you, the key is this ability to make decisions.
To a certain degree, yes, because that's what it's ultimately helping you to do. And when we think about it, so coming back into the LLM situation, right, or that LLM use case. And here we go. This is how this is going to tie back into a search geek talking about this. When I used to type in keywords into a search engine, I had a problem. I'm looking for a solution, or I'm looking for information to help me influence a decision. I would get a list of results, and I had to do the filtering. I had to do the deciphering to actually come to my conclusion. Now, I don't necessarily have to. I can, but I don't have to. The search engine or the LLM is going to give me the accumulation of its knowledge that it has available to it and try to give me that answer so that I don't have to make that decision. So taking a look as you think about the evolution of search engines and how they go from a traditional list of options for you to end up making your selection for you as the human to decide. Now we have LLMs, or we have, in the case of Google with Gemini, just an answer being provided to someone and someone accepting that as the accumulation of all knowledge. This is the recommendation. This is the solution. So this is probably what I need to do. And now people aren't even going in to in a lot of cases to do that additional research themselves, check their sources, whatever. We're accepting the decision that the large language model has made and then reacting to that instead of researching and making the decisions ourselves.
Yeah. That's actually, so that's an interesting point. I want to kind of touch on like how you're leveraging artificial intelligence, be it with, Gemini or whatever else. But
Mm-hmm.
before we get there, I think, it's something important to highlight because of the way that these large language models respond to us. They come across as very confident, authoritative, and it really doesn't, it discourages us from spending the extra brain power to really validate whether or not the answer that we were given makes any sense, right? So, like one good example that I like to talk about, and this was back when Gemini was still relatively new, so we can be charitable to Google on this, but it was in a product demo for Gemini when they were asking for a recipe for cookies. And Gemini actually recommended that you put non-toxic Elmer's glue in the recipe to help with the texture of the cookies. And it was
So So and related to that, I assume you also saw like reporters from The Verge putting glue on pizza to help make the cheese stick to the pizza. Glue was a popular texture solution with the early versions of Gemini for sure.
yeah. So yeah, I mean that's something. So I use like one of my biggest use cases for AI is this large language model search and some kind of brainstorming, being a sparring partner for me and helping
Yes.
make stern emails sound nicer, that kind of stuff. Not that it's not super common, but every once in a while. But like
Yeah, absolutely.
let's talk
I,
maybe like a couple of examples that you're using it, whether it's at work and your personal life, and
yeah.
kind of how it's been helpful and maybe not helpful. Like, what are some of the boundaries and limitations that you've experienced just in the past couple of months, maybe?
No, this is great. So outside of the office, I am a tech media audio visual leader of a ministry. So at my place of worship. So in my work there, a lot of times I will receive notes from the preacher,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes he'll have illustrations in there that make sense to humans, but there may not be the perfect stock photo
Yep.
in Canva to try to capture that illustration. So one of the things that I've started doing with images is taking that illustration and just giving the illustration to Dolly or ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, and just seeing what the image will come out as. Sometimes it's usable, sometimes it's not,
Yeah.
but working in that work, it has helped reduce my time, make things scalable, and I don't need to rely on my own limited graphic design skills
Yeah.
to produce engaging content.
Yeah.
So that certainly is one way that I've used it. I've used it in other cases to find solutions, or if I need something, like if I know all of the standard best practices, but I don't necessarily want to take the time to document all of the standard best practices, use that to get the 80%.
Mm-hmm.
And then take the 20% that's nuanced and just add in the 20% to sort of help, to your point, expand on that creativity and fill in that 20% to really make something personalized to for a solution or for a strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I think a lot of times, I mean, recently more and more people have been talking about AI writing code. And it's funny because a lot of the thought leaders, in air quotes, that I see talking about how revolutionary this is and how software engineers won't need to exist in 2 years and all of this kind of stuff. I've never seen one of those people talking about it in that way who is someone that actually writes code. right? Which is like, okay,
Interesting.
it's really great. It can do boilerplate code, right? Which is essentially what you're talking
Sure.
about with SOPs, right? There's 80% of every, if you have an SOP for, onboarding a new team member, 80% of that content is abstractable to every single business in the world, right? It's standard stuff, access to IT systems, sign off on company policies, whatever else. But it's that 20%, like what you spoke about, that needs to be a little bit more personalized or specific to the business or whatever. The same thing goes with AI code. It can write the basic stuff. You have a, I don't know, if you have a Flask application, you need to put in some new modules or whatever, it can get the architecture of that spun up. But if you were to try to turn an AI coding tool loose on an existing code base and ask it to do something with all of the context and the background necessary that an engineer could provide, it's going to produce some real slop, like unusable slop.
Yeah, and I've experimented with this a little bit. For instance, in trying to turn PDF documentation into web page copy.
Interesting.
If you upload the document, can it pull the text out?
Yeah.
Yes. Can it put some standard HTML code around that PDF technical documentation? Also true. Does that work in the WordPress content management system? Most likely not. So I certainly see a future where there may be less humans required to do the 80%. And this is where that callback to what we saw in the computer revolution. Things have a tendency to repeat themselves.
Yeah.
I'm not a futurist, but I see a potential future state where you're in an evolve or get left behind situation, not a this is going to replace.
Yeah.
This is going to replace you. Most likely not, but you need to learn how to coexist with the technology to speed up your turnaround times or increase the quality of your output, things of that nature. Not be afraid that it's going to do what you were capable of doing in less time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an interesting point because at the end of the day, humans by themselves are never going to win. Computers by themselves will never win either. It's really understanding how to work together with this new technology that we get to a better point in the future, right?
Right.
And I think people who kind of like pick up their toys and go home because they don't want to participate in this new paradigm of how technology is integrated with our personal and professional lives are going to be left behind, not because they are replaceable, but they're kind of turning it into a self-fulfilling prophecy. They refuse to engage with the new technology and understand how it can actually be a force multiplier for them. It won't be.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, right. And, and in a lot of cases, so living where I live now, there's pushback, rightfully so, for people that have made their careers in traditional blue collar work to try to get into, to career transition into whiter collar work, for lack of a better term for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that if you've spent your entire career doing blue collar work and that's what you enjoy doing, but you still need to evolve inside that inside that job world and be open to evolving and not only doing things the way that they've always been done, because otherwise, you're going to get left behind in that situation. Same thing applies to us.
Mm-hmm.
We come into an office instead of going to a job site.
Yeah. It's interesting. So I don't know if you're familiar with it's actually a blog, a subscription-based blog, and it's kind of like Substack, but the guy does his own thing. And he does a podcast. It's called Stratechery. Have you ever heard of that? It's a guy named Ben Thompson.
I have not, but I'm jotting that down mentally. Yeah. I'm gonna check that out.
So there's a really interesting episode he did, I think it's been about a year now, that talked about the parallels between what happened with the mechanization of manufacturing and how the blue collar workers at the time were really resistant to increased robotization and automation of the assembly line because it was taking work away from them. And what's happening nowadays with artificial intelligence in the workplace, where the difference is instead of the blue collar assembly line workers or whatever else you would put there, it's the white collar folks that are used to cushy salaries, but they sit behind a desk most of the day. It's
Yes.
like, oh, my really valuable mind is a little bit less valuable unless I figure out how to use this technology. So we have this
Correct.
kind of like white collar, modern era Luddite situation happening right now. There's a lot of resistance to using this, and I think, like, if I'm honest, I feel it myself sometimes. I think, gosh, like, I'm doing this analysis and I got to be digging in these multi-sheet workbooks and like linking things back together and all of this kind of stuff. I have to maintain this skill set of my own and waste all this extra time, because if I use AI, if I use a large language model for this, is proof that I'm not necessary anymore. I have moments like flashes like that.
I had that same realization. So I've been doing digital marketing primarily on the search engine optimization side of things for over 2 decades. A lot of the work that I've been doing may not have been the physical wrenching and management of a WordPress website, but I know that environment really well. One of the routines that I regularly performed with campaigns was to take a look at client website A and look at competitor B, competitor C, competitor D, and really analyze them and say, all right, they have these elements on your page, on their page, and you're missing that. You want to rank better? Put these elements on your site. Put these elements on your page. Give Google what they want. I saw a prompt maybe a year, maybe 15 months ago now, that a certain SEO influencer just freely put out on LinkedIn or Twitter somewhere. And it was a prompt to do that thing that I do, right? That was my secret weapon. And I put it into Gemini, because Gemini at that time, Gemini was better about crawling the web. Put it into Gemini, got the feedback, and was like, now I'm replaced.
Yeah.
So I've had that similar experience as well. It's surreal, but to your point, and to the point that we've talked about kind of throughout this conversation, it's what value do you add on top of that? What is the large language model or the AI tool giving you that standard knowledge? What does that allow you to stand on and then leap forward and take something next level? That's how you're going to grow, take feedback, enhance what you're doing, as opposed to doing more of the same thing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I since you mentioned, digital marketing and SEO, what if we think a little bit more about future use cases here? Like, where on the 2 to 3 timeline horizon, like, where do you see AI being genuinely useful for you, your team, your clients?
Great question. So it is certainly useful for getting some of that 80% stuff out of the way. What is it not useful? So if we're putting together standard operating procedure documentation, you mentioned that earlier, templates. Mm-hmm. If we're putting together any kind of standardization of output, it can help with that. So it allows us to go deeper with our expertise, or train team members, accelerate the training timelines of team members. And that's something too that maybe gets lost in that translation. If you're in upper management or you're in middle management, if your team coming up is already, maybe the term AI native isn't the right term, but over time that's going to be the case.
For sure.
So if that lower management team that you're building is already AI native and you get a handle on it at upper management or middle management, you're able to accelerate their timelines with the things that they need to be a more strategic thinker.
Mm-hmm.
And that for us, as we're working here at our agency, as we're working through, yes, there's discovery that we need to do to make sure that we're keeping our clients positioned or keeping ourselves positioned in the marketplace. But in addition to that, we're able to then turn around and work with our team to rise the tide of all ships.
Yeah. So you talk about growing up in this or with a kind of AI native mindset. Can you think of any other skill sets, or how would I kind of frame this, like value systems or something that needs to be developed to make full use of AI, not necessarily just in digital marketing and SEO, but just in general? Like, what should we be thinking about as humans, professionals, or just people in our personal life? What skills or mindset should we develop or adopt to be more engaged with and to better leverage AI going forward?
Heavy question, Joe. Thank
Yeah.
you.
We don't play.
So, so if I had to make that suggestion, if there's anything that you're doing that you just feel like is good enough, there may be a opportunity for you to save time, save brain space, or just save anxiety level by attempting to streamline or standardize some of that using AI tools. Now, like I said, is it apps in your smartphone that you're using and you're setting up sequences or you're setting up automations? There's actions inside Alexa, there's actions inside other apps on your phone, and there's probably a thousand derivatives with ads that you can use as an alternative to some of those major platforms. But in addition to that, if you don't see a solution out there, you can give your unique problem, or the problem that you perceive to be unique to yourself, give it to that language model and try it out. See what it says back, or continue to iterate inside a conversation with that LLM and have it be modified. One of my favorite recommendations for any of these language models is to not constantly start up new chats. Now, I may be a little out of date on this, right? Everything's evolving really quickly, so this may not hold up over time. But for me, I don't necessarily take the time to create custom GPTs for any topic that I want to have knowledge on, but I do create individual chat logs where I give a role at the beginning and
Mm-hmm.
I keep that role consistent in that chat. So for me, reheating stuff in my air fryer, I want to know the best way to reheat pizza in my air fryer. It tells me a recommendation. Okay, I liked that recommendation. Now, you are my go-to chat expert for anything related to reheating food in my air fryer. You told me the best way to make pizza. Now tell me the best way to reheat chicken. Tell me the best way to do this. And so one of my favorite AI tips is to streamline some of those conversations and keep the conversation going so that it continues to learn on itself what you liked, and then start to personalize that chat experience so that it gives you more of what you needed, more of what you wanted, and then kind of iterate from there.
Yeah. Side note on air fryers, man. Like, I am just so unconvinced by this extra appliance that people are putting in their kitchens all the time. It's like, I feel like 3 years ago it was this huge thing. Oh, we can fry stuff
Sure.
healthy and all that kind of stuff. Is it still sticking around? How often do you use your air fryer?
Me personally,
Yeah,
pretty often.
really.
So I use it pretty often. Certainly keeps the general temperature of my kitchen in the summer months. Certainly keeps the general temperature of our home down a little bit. Using that as opposed to turning the oven on. I've heard it called the adult easy bake oven. And I think that's an appropriate analogy for it.
Yeah. The real question is now, okay, so we settled that. Like, you're a team air fryer, totally get it, support it. Uh, one
Thank
last
you.
thing, yeah, of course. One last thing I want to talk about is I kind of call it like AI lipstick. So we see AI kind of plastered on everything you look at, and it's not even just software anymore. It's everywhere. Like I saw an advertisement for a vacuum with AI, and I'm just thinking to myself, okay, for the same price point as the competitor's vacuum, that must be some really amazing stuff. Like, what does that mean? You know? So like, does your air fryer have AI, or is it not, is it a little bit too old for the AI lipstick?
Oh, so I love that. I love that term, AI lipstick. That's another note I'm going to take down because it definitely feels like there is a marketing messaging. That's the talking point for people to sell you more of the same thing. So, specific answer to the question about the air fryer. Does my air fryer have AI in it? Probably not, but it does have presets. So, are the presets, is that because it knows it has a standard starting point for reheating certain food items? Does that make it artificially intelligent?
Could be.
And over time, we've called that presets. Now, are we going to start calling that artificial intelligence, or are we going to put some other type of lipstick on top of it? People in the general marketing and promotional industry? Probably. But to me, as I evaluate some of those things, you're right. There's the lipstick on it to get you to upgrade to a model that maybe you otherwise wouldn't. And it really is just positioning some of the same minor innovations that companies have been doing for years, decades, and they were just calling them something different on previous versions of the packaging.
Yeah, for sure. And I also think, when you take a step back and you look at this industry, ChatGPT and OpenAI is a really good example of this. There is so much capital that has flowed into these companies to build these really like crazy compute intensive models, and they're giving away to people for free. They're basically just burning money. I think ChatGPT has raised 40 or OpenAI has raised $40 billion by this point from investors, which is just absolutely nuts for a company that's almost literally burning money every single second of the day.
Right.
Like, do you feel like there are some places where we're kind of shoehorning AI in as more of a marketing term than an actual substantive contribution to the use case or the overall value delivered to the end user? And kind of connected to that, do you see maybe one or two places where we should be really protective, either as professionals or as a society, from allowing artificial intelligence to be a part of an experience or use case, something that we do on a day-to-day basis where it would be really disruptive or kind of really mess something up? Like, is there a realm of our lives, professionally or personally, where you feel like we really need to be conscious of how it intermediates our experiences?
Absolutely. So I still have concern about artificial intelligence doing decision making on what Google would call the your money, your life topics.
Mm.
So for those of you not familiar with what that term means, I'm just table stakes here. So we're talking about personal finance. We're talking about healthcare. We're talking about legal services. We're talking about some of these hyper important subjects that you're either investing a lot of money in, or you're investing a lot of trust in technology to be able to make those recommendations for Google, outside of Google. So do I see in those areas, I've always had trepidation about it. And I think we all should continue to have trepidation about it, because in most cases, the solutions that you need are not going to be one size fits all. So my financial situation is different than your financial situation is different than any of my coworkers' financial situations. But if we all typed the same question in, how do I improve my credit? We're going to get the same kind of standard list of answers. So if you took the same actions that I did, would it have the same output? I don't know.
Yeah.
You would need to actually talk to a financial professional to try to figure out which path is the best for you. Same thing in healthcare. When we work with clients in healthcare inside of our campaigns, we are seeing more confidence from the AI models to step in and offer that advice as long as they put the disclaimer at the bottom. And I see that as risky for the user. It's not risky for the tech because they're putting the disclaimer at the bottom. It's risky for the user, though, because we've all kind of gotten into that routine of trusting the featured snippet or trusting the number one Google result from the source of whatever tool we identify as the source of truth. And that can lead us down some pretty fragmented paths and some pretty disjointed paths. We've seen it with social media, and I think we've seen it with search engines, and I think eventually we're going to see it. It's early stage, but I fear that we're going to see it eventually with artificial intelligence as well. So we need to be course correcting through the path as opposed to needing to have a major stop moment and course correct when we're too far down the line.
Yeah, for sure. I think something you touched on a little bit that I like to zoom in on too, apropos the earlier discussion about how much money is invested in this and how none of these companies and large language model based searches are turning a profit. At a certain point, they need to, right? So what we should be asking ourselves is how will the user experience change when the bills come due, right? When investors are expecting some return, and there's going to be probably a golden era that continues for another couple of years where you can have essentially all you can eat access to ChatGPT for all of these weird questions you want to ask and whatever else. But eventually they're going to need to make money. And when that happens, how are they going to do that? Not everybody in the world is going to be willing to sign up for a $20 a month ChatGPT Pro plan or whatever else it is, right? So I think, like, my operating hypothesis is they're going to become the next Google. For the vast majority of the content that you look at and the responses to your prompts are actually ads. And they might be a little bit more subtle than what it looks like on the SERPs like Google or Bing or whatever else. But eventually there will be a commercial motivation behind the responses that are given to you. And I'm kind of curious if we will be as aware of that as the public as we are right now when that happens with Google and whatnot, where everything above the fold when you do a search is basically just ads, and how that complicates things in the future when we have this really conversational, confident sounding, authoritative sounding sometimes interlocutor, right? Where the responses are actually not coming per se from trying to optimize for what you're asking, the situation you want to talk about and the things you want to change, improve, or whatever, but more so in service to the commercial motivations behind that system itself and the advertisement that was purchased or whatever other commercial considerations exist there. So I think it's really good to, as you say, be course correcting on a more consistent basis and allow ourselves to get to a situation where we realize, oh crap, like we are way off the deep end now. And we have 80% of the people who do searches online just taking whatever is spit back out at them as the final truth, and they're acting on that. And we have people making crazy decisions about their personal finances and whatever because mint.com bought some ads with OpenAI. Now everyone's doing this crazy like mortgage payoff scheme, or they're ignoring this, whatever else. I think it's a good point you make about really trying to be conscious of course correcting in a more incremental sense rather than waiting for things to get really bad.
My suspicion is that we're going to get there if it's not just some of the platforms that maybe more natively have advertising baked into their system, Facebook, Google, right? If it's not just some of those major platforms that already have it, I think that's going to come. And as a user or as the parent of children who are going to use these platforms more integrated into their lives, I hope that it's as transparent as it was with some of the earlier iterations of Google incorporating advertising into their traditional search results. Because you lost that way a little bit in the social media revolution. And when the time came for influencer advertising or whatever channel to start to try to course correct or to double back, the cat was out of the bag. And it's really hard to put the cats back in.
Yeah, exactly. Cool, man. So just wrapping up, like, could you recommend a couple of resources for people who are curious about AI, not necessarily even just within the digital marketing and SEO space, if that's the perfect place to start, but just in general? Like, where would you, if someone comes to you and they're kind of curious and want to understand more, where would you point them?
I am very much a student of building the car as you drive it or learning from experience. So my recommendation in a lot of cases for people is to download it and try it. For those of you who haven't adopted it or tried to jump on board with it, download the platforms. Go ahead, create an account for free, and then maybe don't jump right in and try to have it answer complicated questions for you or tough questions for you. Just get comfortable chatting with it, right? So you're right. There probably are resources out there that can inform you about using them. But to me, the best in my experience, the best experiences are always learning by doing.
For sure.
And so that would be my recommendation. So I have 5 of them downloaded onto my device, but it's not just to take up space. One of the experiments that I'm regularly running, especially because new versions of these tools are rolling out every month or certainly on a very tight schedule. One of my exercises with maybe some common questions is to take one question and ask it to the 5 different tools and just start learning how it's going to answer something that's controlled. And when you get those answers to something that's controlled, the human element starts coming in, and which one did you like the best? And then I think eventually you start learning, okay, this chatbot tool actually does a really great job at answering this type of question, or with this type of challenge that I have, I can go to this one. This one's better for solution B and solution C. I think each one of them have their nuances and their benefits. It's just a matter of experimentation, learning as you go, and then ultimately finding which one covers 80% of what you want to do. And maybe for some of that other 20%, using different tools for different use cases.
Yeah, it makes sense. So in summary, download and try, be careful of what you ask it, take some stuff, especially with a grain of salt. And I like to add, always use please and thank you, just in case when the robots take over, you want to make sure that you're remembered as a kind human, right?
Well, do say please and thank you, even at the risk of costing the platforms millions of those billions of dollars that they've raised.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important too, because in a sense, where the way that I interact with it, it really does authentically feel like another, I don't know, entity, being, whatever. I wouldn't say human per se, but I think, and I was talking to one of our other guests about this, we're using it as a sparring partner and kind of doing feedback cycles with it, whatever. So in our minds, it really is a stand-in for another person. And if we lose the habit of these pleasantries and the politeness that we use with our other actual humans, because we're only communicating with this thing on a regular basis, that also kind of starts to degrade our human relationships a little bit. You just go to someone and say, produce this table for me. You won't say, please, how are you, whatever. So yeah, you always say, good morning, good afternoon, please do this. Oh, that's not quite right. Give positive, constructive, redirected feedback and all of that kind of stuff. It keeps the habit up. Plus, when the robots take over.
Sandwich method with your artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
I hear you on that. And I think there's certainly, there are methods built into it where you're able to give it positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement, as the case may be. Sometimes it also, the engines get a little bit ahead of themselves. So I've seen too where the feedback from the LLM will be very human-like, but the output that it gives is not on a human. So it's talking back to you like a human would respond if you ask it to do a task, but it doesn't know to follow up with you, even if it says, I'm going to follow up with you. So you're still hounding it to get the output that you want. And I've experimented with that too. And I find it when it realizes it has failed, it's how apologetic it is almost annoying. I'll just say that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a weird upside down world. Cool,
Yeah.
Bentz. Well, thanks for the time today. And where can the people find you and Dom? You got some socials or websites you want to share?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. So the easiest place to get to me online outside of directom.com, which is Direct Online Marketing's website, is LinkedIn. So there are multiple Jonathan Bentzes on LinkedIn. Just remember, I'm the one that's bald with a beard, and you'll find the right one. But yeah, reach out to me, connect with me there. I love having conversations like this, but I also do quite a lot of advising or consulting and also help businesses from all over the world devise strategies to help get more of what they want out of their web platforms. So would love to have conversations there on LinkedIn or over at directom.com.
Sounds good. Well, thanks again. Thanks for tuning in to Get Discovered, a podcast where AI, SEO, and the future of online visibility collide. For more about us, swing by Prerender.io. We make sure your site isn't hiding from Google, Bing, or the next-gen AI bots sniffing around for fresh content. I'm Joe Walsh. See you next time.